welcome to the Goot Reaction. I'm Joe Goot, your host, and with me is Triple M, my main man from the Midwest. And we're recording on New Year's Day, 2025. So happy New Year's, everyone. And we're going to try a little bit of a different format this time. When we started out this podcast, we really wanted to try to capture kind of, I guess we'll call it the magic of our normal weekly conversations and just turn that into a show. And one of the hallmarks of those conversations was that we really didn't have a lot planned. We would maybe each pick up, some interesting ideas during the week and maybe have some notes or something, but really it was fairly unstructured, and we would just come to the table with just some different ideas or topics that interested us, and we would just kind of bounce them off of each other and see where it took us. And a lot of times we'd go down some rabbit holes, and 2 hours later we'd be on 10 different subjects deep. But it was always fun, and it never really had a super structure to it, but it was just the way our brains worked. And so we thought we would kind of try to capture some of that today here, and not have a lot planned, not bringing a lot of notes to the table, but just have a normal conversation and just see what happens. And so if you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. Any thoughts on the new format, and not 100% sure we're going to stick to it, but for this episode, we just thought that would be fun, and kick off the new year in a slightly different way. So where we thought we would start, it's kind of the big news of the day, or the attacks, the one in New Orleans, and then the other situation that happened in front of a Trump property in Las Vegas. And for me, I kind of want to start there. We don't necessarily, want to make this really political, but for me, it was interesting that it was a Tesla Cybertruck that was rigged to explode in front of a Trump Plaza hotel. And so I just think it's, if anything, it's kind of ironic. And I think, who knows, there's probably less information about what happened there than in the New Orleans attack. And so, it's all, from my side of things anyway, it's all speculation, but I do think it's kind of interesting that it was, a truck put out by Elon Musk and that blew up in front of a Trump hotel. And so who knows what the motivation was there, the politics of the guy who did that, but I just thought that was kind of ironic, and maybe that was part of the message. Maybe that was just a pure coincidence. I don't know, but I do think that was interesting there. And then, with the situation down in New Orleans, tragic down there. The body count, I think, is up to 15 now, 15 casualties, and then a bunch of injured. So just a really, really bad situation down there. And, one thing that stood out to me there too was that the president-elect put out a tweet saying that it was an immigrant that had attacked down there. And I think it was just based off of the guy's name, which he had a foreign sounding name, but he was born in Texas and he was an Army veteran. So, or I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure if it was Army. I can't remember, but I think military veteran. I'll say I don't remember which branch he was in, but yeah. So already, either not caring or intentionally spreading disinformation there, trying to anger people and make them think it was an immigrant, doing that attack, and when it was a homegrown, uh, terrorist situation. And then with the ISIS flag, and just that also tying into Trump saying that he completely 100% eliminated ISIS. And that's the whole point to me about that type of ideology, is that even if you dismantle the official organization itself, it's more than that. It's an idea, and you're always going to have terrorist ideologies around the world, jihadist ideologies that can strike anywhere, because it's not about always an organized movement. It's the ideas behind it. And again, a lot is yet to be uncovered in that situation, but just again, a very tragic way to start off the new year, and very unfortunate to see that news today. Any thoughts on that?
I was just doing a little researching here while you were talking. It does look like that person in New Orleans was in the Army and then the Army Reserve
Mm,
for
okay.
about 14 years. Yeah, born in Texas. Fought for our country. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of all the details of that. Um,
Yeah.
Agree with what you said about the ideology. I thought it was interesting too that when they already called it a terrorist attack, it's hard to. I was trying to look earlier for what exactly the definition of when they declare something a terrorist attack versus not.
Hmm.
If it's someone acting alone, is it? And let make sure I'm clear. It's tragic either way. Uh, I'm
Mm.
not justifying that it should be one or the other, but I'm just curious how they're. It seems like they have their. I'll give an example in a second. What makes me sort of had wanting to dig into this question. This was labeled a terrorist attack. The Cybertruck blowing up in Las Vegas, they're saying is being investigated as a terrorist attack. There's a possible terrorist attack. The trucks in both cases were, from what I've read, were rented from the same company, that Turo, which is
Hmm.
like is that the one where you can like kind of like Airbnb where you can rent out, like you can make your own vehicle available for rent, and then
Yeah,
people
private
can.
vehicles.
Yeah, but it sounds
Yep.
like they must also have some sort of inventory
Hmm.
themselves. I think from what I was reading, but I won't claim to be any kind of expert there. So that does make you wonder if it was coordinated.
Hmm.
Like I said, it'll be interesting to see, what information comes out on that.
Yeah.
Uh, Tragic, though.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people that are just down there enjoying the first day of the year and looking forward to the Sugar Bowl and just trying to live their lives, and it's yeah, it sucks. Also interesting too is not to get too far off here, but the guy that Luigi Mangione, who is alleged to have killed Brian Thompson, the United CEO. He's being charged with terrorism charges as well, and so again, to your point, kind of makes you wonder, like where do they draw the line, and what is considered a terrorist attack versus just mayhem, and
Yeah.
makes you wonder there.
Are all assassinations attempts or successful and or unsuccessful? Are those acts of terrorism?
Right. In that case, my thought is that they're trying to send a message, and they're trying to bring as serious of charges as possible to really inhibit other people from doing that. And so they want to make it as serious as possible. And I think the terrorism charge then is a federal charge. So that way, regardless if there's the death penalty in New York, which I don't think they have the death penalty anymore. I could be wrong there, but I don't think they do. And so if he would, let's say, get a lesser sentence on state charges, then there could potentially be federal charges that could involve the death penalty in that case. So they might be just like trying to cover their bases there. But again, I think it's also a deterrent, for future attacks potentially.
That's a good possibility and good point. It makes it feel a little arbitrary in a way. Like,
Hmm.
is there? I guess I'd almost feel better if there was like written down rules somewhere that said, "Oh, if it checks these 10 boxes, then that's an act of terror." I feel like sometimes that's more to maybe make us feel a way about it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, and you know, was gonna maybe try not to stir the pot too much on this one, but uh, when these things happen, and you brought up the Luigi Mangione, which was a great point, but when I was thinking about the other two that happened today, and then I don't know if you read the story from, I think it first popped up for me a few days back, but about the situation in Virginia where the FBI raided this guy's farm, and I'm not going to say the guy's name. You guys can look up the story if you want to, but raided this guy's farm and found. I think he was originally arrested on some illegal weapons charge. He had a short barrel rifle or something. I guess maybe that's illegal. But they were following some tips from his neighbors, and they found a uh, as I'm reading right here, the FBI found the largest cache of quote finished explosive devices in the bureau's history during the arrest of a Virginia man earlier this month. So he had a okay, well, I'm reading, so I might as well not. Investigators found a stockpile of more than 150 homemade improvised explosive devices that were, quote, assessed to be pipe bombs, according to prosecutors. They said some of the pipe bombs were labeled lethal and preloaded into an apparent wearable vest.
Jeez.
Okay, some of them were loaded into like a bag. He had some sort of highly explosive material in his freezer, stored right next to food. He apparently has a couple kids. As you read down in the article, it talks about how he used photos of President Biden for target practice. Said something about he hopes, or after the um, attempted assassination on Trump in Pennsylvania, that he hoped the shooter, quote, he hoped the shooter doesn't miss Kamala, and some other things. Now, what gets me about all this is nowhere. Okay, so I'm just applying my brain to it here for a second, right? So, um, he's putting these explosives into a vest. he's, I mean, he's expressed feelings about certain public figures. They found no concrete plans for him to actually do anything. Um, his lawyers are arguing basically that there's not a shred of evidence in the record that Mr. Spafford ever threatened anyone, and the contention that someone might be in danger because of their political views and comments is nonsensical, his lawyer wrote in a filing on Tuesday. In fact, the evidence proved that Mr. Spafford is not a danger, but a hardworking family man with no criminal record. Now, I would have thought somewhere in this article, I might read that he is a suspected terrorist based on his accumulation of, explosives, and I guess I did say his name there, but sorry, suspected explosives and other illegal things, dangerous things happening here. But that word, and granted, I fully acknowledge he committed no acts of violence. Now, he did some crimes associated with the things he's possessing and some other things he's doing.
Yeah.
But committed no actual acts. But nowhere in here does it say anything like the word terrorism or terrorist. You know what I mean? So this guy sounds, I mean, it sounds pretty scary to me. Like, why would you be accumulating explosives? And so, like I said, then when I think about the things that happened, granted, those were acts that were committed. Talk about terrorism. Got Luigi Mangione. We use the word terrorism. See something like this, we don't use the word terrorism. And I just wonder where the line is. How do we arbitrarily decide? Now, is it, if he'd have acted, would it then be considered terrorism? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then you get the difference between what is labeled like domestic terrorism, which would be, the homegrown variety, which is interesting in the New Orleans case, because then you've got a guy who's an American citizen, and yeah, like you said, who served his country and somehow got radicalized, probably, apparently, and then was flying the flag of a foreign terrorist organization. That is a little more clear, but then what do you call that? Do you still call that domestic terrorism, or do you, when you're inspired by a foreign organization, but you're maybe not actually part of them, or you join them in principle, but you're not really part of some operation on domestic soil? How do you distinguish that then? And then, like, in the case of the kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer a few years back, is that they call that domestic terrorism because that was done for political reasons.
Did
Um,
they call that domestic terrorism?
I don't, I don't know. I was actually thinking about looking that up, and just to see how that was kind of characterized. Um, let's see here.
Because I feel like I don't think that the word was used for that
Okay,
at the time. But yeah, let's definitely see. I don't
okay.
know. Not according to Wikipedia. Suspects charged with state crimes, including providing material support for terrorist acts, firearm crimes, and gang membership. Um, Charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping.
At
Yeah.
least in the headlines I'm looking at, I don't see anything. I don't see the word terrorism. Although, yeah, in the Wikipedia, the subtext said the FBI arrested 13 men suspected of orchestrating a domestic terror plot. But that's just the Wikipedia. So I'm looking to see. Most of the time, they're just talking about a kidnapping plot, um, which I guess, if you think about, so let's just look up, the definition of terrorism real quick, because I know that could add a little bit of clarity here. Um, because usually it's so, okay. The unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. So I think that might be the key difference in that case, where because it was just, it was a plot to kidnap her specifically, and it didn't involve, and she was a political figure, but it didn't involve going after innocent civilians. Um, then maybe that's why that wasn't really referred to specifically that way. Whereas in the two cases today, those were clearly just crimes of opportunity where the victims were just innocent random bystanders, and so it didn't have anything to do with um, any kind of specific targeting there, other than maybe again in the case of the Trump Tower or the Trump property in Las Vegas, maybe if they were trying to send a specific message there. But again, that's just pure conjecture, so that's can't really say much more on that.
Yeah. While you were talking there, I was looking. I wanted to see. Remember that Caesar Sayoc who built all those pipe bombs and sent them to various Democratic
Mm-hmm.
officials a few years ago. I wanted to look at that. According to Wikipedia, that was FBI investigated that as a case of domestic terrorism as well too. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
Yep.
Just interesting, like how they decide. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what shakes out with
Yeah.
some of these things. But
Yeah. Well, and then again, so back to the Mangione case, that makes you wonder why then, again, that doesn't seem to fit the definition of terrorism. That would seem to be a very targeted, specific attack. It wasn't just against random people. Now, granted, the guy was technically an innocent civilian. He wasn't a political figure or anything, but, you know, it wasn't just random people. He was specifically targeted. So I don't know. To me, that's stretching a bit. I agree with all the other charges against him, but the terrorism charge seems a little bit much there and not appropriate. But again, I think that's more to send a message than it is to kind of backstop the other charges in case they. And I also heard some commentary around like a jury can just say like, no, we don't agree with these charges, so we're essentially going to just refuse to convict. And so, you know, that's a possibility too. If he's viewed as a sympathetic figure and what he did, being something that's horrible, yet if enough, even one jury member finds it acceptable, and let alone maybe multiple that are, kind of sympathetic to his ideology, then, those charges go away, and then you're left with, whatever other charges there would be on the federal level. So I think that's another reason why they're doing that. But I just don't believe the terrorism charge is appropriate in that case.
Yeah, maybe the juror doesn't even have to be sympathetic to their ideology. Just think that the charge, just like you're saying, is maybe a little overblown for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess who ultimately decides the charges? Is it just the prosecution or is it the
I think it's
judge?
the DA. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they believe that, they charge based on what they think they can prove, or what they hope they can prove, and then, you know and then I think the judge then could say, like, or the defense could say, like, we move to have these charges dropped, or this trial, whatever, what, I don't know the specific legal terminology, but um yeah, so they could do defense motions to try to nullify that. But yeah, then it's up to the DA to decide what charges.
Okay. So then there could always be some, uh, I guess right in that alone there could be some arbitrary type decisions made. Like there is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I mean, you'd
Yeah.
think you'd want to make them as accurate as possible, so that as you're putting that in front of a jury, that there wouldn't be any room for error, and you wouldn't want probably a track record as a DA or a prosecutor to be like, oh, you keep trying to get people on certain charges, and they keep getting overturned. You know what I mean? Or they keep getting
Mm-hmm.
changed. So you think you'd want
Yeah.
to be as accurate as possible as you could be in that. So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also there's sort of the concept of, like, overcharging, and I think that's also part of a way to try to get a plea deal. Um, we're going to charge you with 10 different things, even if five of them are just technicalities, and five of them then are actual real provable charges. And then you could just sort of say, like, okay, we're going to plea, just to have leverage, basically, in a plea deal.
Yeah, gotcha. Hey, that's interesting that you mentioned overcharging. Did you? I heard about this from Kyle Kalinske, one of his videos. Did you, by chance, see or hear about the story about the Alabama prison system or prison that is essentially, as Kyle was, well, he referenced an article from it's al.com, alabama.com, basically. Title of the article is Alabama says they're safe enough for KFC but too dangerous for parole. And so essentially the story is, I'm going to paraphrase here, but I just told everybody what it was if they want to go read it. But there's at least one prison in Alabama where they're setting up a bunch of prisoners on like a work release program to where they can literally leave the prison, go get jobs during the day or for whatever time frame. They have
Mm-hmm.
to come back to the prison because they're still technically prisoners.
Hmm.
But then every time these people come up for parole, they deny their parole, or they have a habit of denying their parole. But it turns out when they go out and they work these jobs, most of the money actually goes to the prison
There
instead
it
of the
is.
worker. So the worker makes the equivalent of, I think he said something like $1 to $4 an hour or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
which then I believe, and I might be mixing my stories here a little bit because this made me do a little more research, is that the prison then makes them purchase certain goods that they need in the prison. So like they need to have income in some form in the prison there's a commerce system in the prison. So they need to have some
Mm-hmm.
money. So they need to have jobs. But the way they set up these jobs, most of the money actually goes to the prison. And in this case, it was believe a state prison. So the state was making a bunch of money off of these people working these low wage jobs, where if they paroled them, they would lose that income stream. Now, this made me think of stories I've read about private prisons that do much the
Yeah.
same thing. Now, I know you wanted to touch on potentially the private prison aspect in our whole in our last episode, which was, when did the left supposedly take over? Or I forget what we actually titled it, but
Yeah.
because private prison systems, as I understand it, have been doing something like that for years, where they basically, like, other companies will hire the prison to do some sort of manufacturing or something. They'll set up like a in-house manufacturing setup or something, or packaging or something. They'll make the prison workers work in it again because they need to have income to buy goods within the prison. It kind of reminds me a
Hmm.
lot of the old company store back in the days of, like,
Oh yeah,
where
you
you
wouldn't
had,
get paid with dollars. You got paid with company credit or
yeah, so
whatever.
you had to
Yeah.
you had to work for the company to get their currency to buy, and you can only spend it in their, buying stuff back from the company. It's the same kind of system. But again,
Hmm.
they would have in the prison, they would have these workers work for very little. You know what I mean? So now the company that's hired the prison to do this is getting its labor at a reduced rate versus having to go
Yep.
hire people off the street.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And then, so then,
Yeah.
so then, let's go to the whole incarceration over sentencing, overcharging. Uh, we could get into, things like how marijuana crimes have been sentenced so severely for years. We could get into all kinds of other things. We could get into the incarceration rate of minorities versus, you know, white people. We could get into
Mhm.
going down all kinds of rabbit holes in this discussion, just to
Yeah.
find out that on the back end, we might even have touched on this in one of the previous episodes too. That essentially there is still it's not slavery, but it's a very near form of slavery that exists.
Like
And
indentured servitude, basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you follow this all the way through, you can see where, you know, we really haven't, in a lot of cases, haven't gotten that far away from, people can complain about civil rights and DEI and all this stuff, but we
Yeah.
really haven't gotten that far away from that kind of slavery mentality, you know.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it too, the prisons, they're getting paid, the private prisons, they're getting paid by the state for each body in their system. And then they're making money off of those bodies once they're in the system. And then you think about how, you couple the opioid crisis, and especially in poor rural communities, oftentimes, majority white communities, and how they're being impacted by this, where, you know, someone unfortunately gets hooked on opiates, many oftentimes through no fault of their own. They're trying to just
Just
manage their
simply,
pain.
yeah, just simply got prescribed the opiates for pain
Yeah.
and got addicted. Weren't even abusing them.
Hmm.
Just got
Just
addicted
as
through
prescribed.
as
Yep.
prescribed.
Yep. And then they end up in a situation where then all of a sudden they need them, their prescription runs out, whatever, but they're hooked, and then they do something stupid to try to get the next pill, and next thing you know, they're in the system, or they get a fine or something stupid and they can't pay it, and so then they get put in one of these private prisons while they're waiting, trial, or jail, excuse me, waiting trial, or because they can't pay the fine, so they have to go to jail until they can pay the fine, and then they're in the system permanently because then they just get stuck. And it just goes round and round, but it's people making money at every phase of this. And to your point earlier, that doesn't seem very progressive or liberal at all. It actually seems extremely harsh and very a very conservative view of how you want to rehabilitate, how you want to handle that situation, just by locking people up and then creating a huge profit stream for certain small percentages of the community. So yeah, just a really backward situation for sure.
Yeah, there was a section of the movie, the Michael Moore movie, Capitalism: A Love Story. I don't know if you ever saw that, but
Oh yeah,
that's
yeah.
like,
It's been a while, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, that thing's like, what, pushing 20 years old now, I think, or maybe 15, something like that. But there was that
Yeah.
section where he was talking about I think it was a judge in Pennsylvania, or somewhere
Oh
that was
yeah.
being bribed by the private prison system essentially to over sentence. I believe it was like kids, like teenagers.
Yeah, cash for kids. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like the juvenile detention system.
yeah, basically, so that the prison system, because they were going to get, like you said, subsidized by the state,
Hmm.
and it's more of a, it's just kind of more of an example, something we touched on before too, of like anytime somebody can figure out how to funnel public tax dollars into private institutions,
Hmm.
they're gonna find a way to do it. You know?
Yep. Well, and it's funny too because that was that judge who I think was sentenced to like 14 or 16 years, something like that, which is a pretty harsh sentence. But I mean that he ruined a lot of people's lives, and some of those kids actually ended up taking their own lives in that whole thing. And he was one of the people that Biden pardoned recently.
Oh,
Which
really?
yeah,
I didn't hear that.
yeah,
Well, I knew pardoned or commuted. He commuted a bunch of
he
sentences off of death row. Did he pardon some people?
no, yeah, because he did some pardons as well, and so I think it just so happened that it was a bunch of people that were towards the end of either getting older or towards the end of their sentences, and I think just got kind of caught up as one of the numbers of people that
Mm.
fell into that category of circumstances, and so yeah, he was one of those one of those people. So
I hadn't heard
um,
that.
yeah,
Interesting.
which I think if they knew, I mean, they probably should have vetted the names before doing something like that, because that's an easy target then to say like, oh man, what are you doing there? Like that should have been an easy one to avoid and let that guy just rot in jail for as long as his sentence was. But
Yeah, I'm sure.
yeah,
I'm sure. Any way you try to slice and dice those decisions, get you're gonna get it's gonna get nitpicked over by somebody, and
yeah,
they're like, "Oh, you could have done
yeah.
this instead of that."
Well, and then you talk about the commutations as well, from federal death penalty cases to be just life in prison with no parole. Um, and then the three people that he didn't commute, which were all very serious crimes, really, really bad people. But then I don't know. Like I really, I mean, my sense of things is that that was a political decision, not a moral decision. And I just have a problem with the death penalty regardless. Like I think it's a punishment of never seeing the light of day again, and never getting out of prison for the rest of your life. I think that's a perfectly acceptable punishment, and I don't believe in the state murdering people. There's already, especially like in cases where there's mass murderers, or just again just really really bad people. Like I don't think you know having the state commit murder is the answer to that, and especially since we know that there's a certain percentage of people that are on death row that are innocent, and the fact that we know we've executed people that didn't deserve it. I don't think somebody made this point the other day. I don't remember what show it was. Would we have? I think it was an advocate for abolishing the death penalty, and he was saying something like 1 in 8. I don't know if it's actually that high, but something like that. Some pretty amazing statistic. Like when it comes to life and death situations, and if you're gonna have a 1 in 8 mistake rate, and that results in someone that innocent dying, what in what other universe would we accept that? Like 1 in 8 plane flights explodes midair, or 1 in 8 hamburgers is going to kill you. Like it's an unacceptable
Yeah,
mistake rate. And so why would we allow that to continue in the justice system?
no, I could see. I'm not arguing against what you're saying, but I'm saying I could see some people saying, "Well, yeah, but the people on the plane flight, you assume most of them are innocent. A lot of these people on death row, they did go through the process and be deemed to be guilty." Now, So it's a little different in the lottery sense there of like who's up for it. But I
Hmm.
agree with you in what you're saying. So many times you find out that that person was actually innocent. I mean, I feel like I'm reading a headline all the time that says somebody who'd been in prison for 25 years actually found to
Hmm.
be innocent based on new DNA evidence or
Right.
relooking at the DNA evidence with newer technology or something. Yeah, it's a
Or yeah, someone's confessions retracted, and it was like a thin conviction based on a eyewitness testimony, and they recanted or something like that. Yeah, there's always some cases like that where if there's any doubt whatsoever, and the justice system likes to pretend that it's error free and that it's infallible, and even if they say like, oh yeah, we're all human, we all make mistakes. Well, okay, so why do we have 100% certain death for cases where we're not 100% certain? So yeah, I just don't agree with that at all. And so
yeah.
I just think in those cases, like either you commute everyone or don't do it. Like I don't know, or I don't know. It's a tough situation because again, those three that he didn't commute, I mean, just
Well, they were the high
awful.
profile names too, right?
Yeah, the biggest, like the Tree of Life synagogue shooter, Dylan Roof, and
The Boston
the
Marathon.
Boston Marathon bomber. Yeah,
Never.
Zhokar Chernayev, or again, I
Yeah.
don't know if I pronounced his name right, but yeah, so three really like like hated people, and rightly so. Where there's little doubt that they were the ones that did those crimes, but still, just again, if you're going to have a principle on not being for the death penalty, and then to just say like these three are somehow different, I don't know, it's just I struggle with that one. I'm not saying I have 100% conviction on that one way or the other, but I just don't believe in the death penalty, and I think if you're gonna do that, you should probably just commute them all, and they're all going to rot in prison. So
Yeah, but the other thing you may be touching on it, or something you said a minute ago, is why don't we have better like rehabilitation programs too? I mean,
yeah.
some people, depending on the crime, probably do deserve to sit there, but our prison system just in general is not about one. It gets to some of the other things we started this conversation with, right? Like,
Hmm.
our prison system is not designed to help people and get them back on the straight and narrow and get them out to be productive citizens out in the world again. It's designed to keep them in prison and it turns out maybe use them for near slave labor, and,
Yeah, exploit the shit out of
so
them.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of things to fix in that whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's, we talked about healthcare recently, and that's another area where I think we could learn a lot from some of the Scandinavian countries about how they handle offenders, even in some cases, violent offenders, where I think they're still housed separately, but they are treated very differently there. And the way their primary goal is not, you know, punishment and humiliation and degradation. It's rehabilitation, respect, and, of course, there is an element of punishment to it, of course, but it is just a vastly different system in some of those places where, they actually treat them as human beings, not as, slave labor, and not as just um, what they did, but who they are. And I think that's a very different approach. And the recidivism rates are, just look at the numbers. The recidivism rates are way better, or way lower in those places compared to what we have here. Um, so I think, again, there's just examples in other places that we should take a look at.
Well, yeah, because here, I mean, and again, I'm going a lot by things I hear and read, and but
Yeah,
we,
same, same.
yeah, but we let people out of prison, and they may have the same amount of nothing they started with, and so now they're trying to build their life back. But hey, also they have now a criminal record, so it's that much harder. And sometimes they are, do end up turning back to crime to because they got nothing to work with. But what you're talking about in some of the
Hmm.
Scandinavian countries, where they actually kind of build you back up, maybe help you get back on your feet, and then put you out in the world in a situation where you can see succeed. To a large extent, I'm sure the recidivism rate is a lot lower
Yeah.
because you're treating the whole situation different.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's actually more of a safety net there for people in those situations. And yeah, like you said, instead of just kicking them back out on the street where they go back to virtually nothing. And so their opportunities are scarce and their support system is thin at best. And so yeah, so what are the opportunities really for them? So
Yeah, even a lot of the drug crimes. I remember reading things where they something along the lines that like if you're addicted to heroin or something, they actually set up clinics where you can go get the heroin. I think this was part of what we talked about with the whole issue with Portland, right? Where Portland tried
mm-hmm,
to make all drugs illegal or make them all legal. I mean, legalize
mm-hmm,
everything, like some of the Scandinavian countries have done. But what they didn't do on the other side is change some of the enforcement things around it or make things, set up some of the support systems for people who had addiction problems.
mm-hmm.
Um, so of course it didn't work, right? Of course
Yeah.
it just didn't work in the long run. But some places have clinics where you can go. And listen, I'm not justifying heroin addiction or anything. What I'm saying is there's different ways to handle it. They have places where you can go and get your fix and then go out in the world and do work your job or whatever it is you're going to do, but you're not engaging in illegal activity to get your fix. And maybe they're even working with you to try to wean yourself off of that drug, but they're
Mm-hmm,
not putting you in a situation where for you to get your fix, you've got to go and engage in illegal activity, which then puts
mm-hmm.
everything else you're trying to do at risk. Um, it's just a bit more humane way to approach the whole thing. It's the more people first approach,
Yeah.
to something like that. Again, I don't want to see
Yep.
anybody addicted to drugs. I don't want to see, ideally, nobody in that situation. But addiction is a disease that you have to treat like you would treat other diseases. You can't just, you know, you can't say, oh, hey, we're going to make cancer illegal, and then when you get cancer, now you have a legal issue. You're fighting on top of, on top of your illness. You know what I
Right.
mean? But we do that with drugs. We do that with addiction. We make a lot
Yeah.
of things you're addicted to illegal, and then that starts this whole downward spiral of problems.
Yep. Yeah. And you mentioned, Portland, and there's a huge, homeless crisis here too. And that's another thing that ties in with the addiction stuff. And then, so you put those two things together, and then you've got even a more difficult circumstance to overcome. You're trying to find stability in your life, but you don't have a roof over your head, and you don't have a place to call home. However humble it might be. Um, if you don't have that, then be how are you going to handle the stress and fight an addiction when you don't have some kind of stability in your life? So until there's something in place that addresses all of that stuff holistically, yeah, there's those problems aren't going to get any better anytime soon for places like Portland and other areas that are struggling with that same kind of problem. Yeah. Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else that you want to talk about?
I had a few things written down here, not really notes, just more so I don't forget as I as I think of stuff during the week.
Yeah.
Um, I did see an interesting conversation. Well, let's talk about this for a second. This whole little civil war that seems to be going on the right now with the whole.
Ooh, get the popcorn. Let's go.
It's just interesting to watch this play out. It's the whole uh, Elon and Vivek um, coming out and saying that we need to hire immigrants, particularly probably Indian immigrants on H-1B visas because of their ability to do the engineering jobs and the development jobs and coding jobs that's needed within like Silicon Valley to make those companies as prosperous as they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have a lot of folks in MAGA saying, "Wait a minute, we meant it when we said no immigration or net neutral immigration." So now those two sides are at odds on this whole immigration issue, and it just I don't know. I find it really just interesting how quickly some of the fissures are starting there with just how do I want to say it? You know what I mean? Like I feel like anytime, folks, if you want to realize that you're getting played, you know, with what you're being told during campaign time versus what's going to happen during. Now, I mean, in this case, I got to be honest. I side with Elon. I think I'm not saying. Hold on, let me be careful there. I'm not saying there's not qualified people to do the jobs here. What I'm saying is there's probably not enough of them. And you need to build up the labor force. You need to probably bring in all the qualified people you can to do those jobs, right? So you can't just do it one way or the other. There's got to it's got to be a combination. Right, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you think about just I was just going to contrast, the populations with 330, 340 million people here, and another 8 billion around the rest of the world. So sure. I mean, if you want the best talent, I mean, you should be definitely open, and it's a more progressive stance than to say, hey, we're not so nativist that we are going to turn a blind eye to the rest of the world and pretend like we're the best at everything. Like, no, you should really just go out and look for the best of the best and say, like, and it's part of the program too. It says that you need to be able to show that you can't hire an equivalent native born American worker for this job. And then you should be able to say, okay, I'm going to bring in someone from somewhere else and fill that position and make our company stronger. And then hopefully, ideally, I think they become an American citizen. They contribute to, the betterment of the country and the community that they live in and all that kind of stuff too. So,
yeah. And I would like to, remind that side that they do tend to be anti-higher education, anti-college system where you typically go to get trained to do these kind of jobs. There's this resurgence, pushing people towards the trades, which is great. We need people in the trades too. I'm not certainly not condemning that whatsoever. We absolutely need people in the trades, but you're very anti-higher education. You're very anti the American university higher education system. Well, that's where people go to get trained to do these jobs. So you can't have it both ways here. But it's just interesting, and this whole thing. Some of the things that Elon said, which I don't agree with, where he was basically saying he was coming out and saying, I'm paraphrasing, but go look at his tweets or whatever the hell you call them now. Basically saying people over here aren't smart enough to do these jobs. Mm-hmm. Basically what he said. Now, those are the people that just mostly voted for him in a lot of cases, right? Like, not exclusively, obviously, but and I think back to the Dominion lawsuit and some of the text messages that were coming out from people at Fox during that whole Dominion lawsuit discovery, where they were basically saying, one, that they didn't like Trump at the time. Hey, guys, it's not me saying it. Go read the text messages. Go read the stuff that came out at that time.
Yeah, see what Tucker says about Trump. Yeah, in his own words.
But then also what they were saying about their own viewers.
Yeah,
that they don't have a lot of respect for their own viewers. So this is points A and B now, people. That just there seems to be all this light bulbs going off and all this come to Jesus moments after the election. After the election, people are all of a sudden finding out some of this information or not liking the things that people that got elected are going to do. Where were you for 4 years when everybody on the left was trying to point this stuff out to you? And now I know I sound like Kyle Kalinske because he was going on a whole rant about that on a video I was watching earlier today. But guys, people have been trying to tell you. People have been trying to tell
Yeah.
you this whole time that they do not care about you. You are a pawn in their game, in their system to get power and to keep power. Please, please
Yep.
become more informed, and it's just, we're here to try to help where we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, ultimately, it feels like we're watching them get caught in a bait and switch in front of our very eyes. Like they
It's a
believed
great way to put it.
all, yeah. I mean, they believed all the hype and the fancy promises and all the, shit talk about the other side and everything. And then when it comes right down to it, now we're already seeing before this administration's even in power, we're already seeing how like, yeah, it's actually the other way around. We're gonna try to get more immigrants in here in these skilled positions because it's cheaper for us and it's easier for us to exploit them than it is legally for us to exploit American workers. And then, oh, sorry, turns out we're not going to be able to lower grocery prices probably because that's really hard. And, all these types of things that are already starting to come up that, yeah, it's just a big old bait and switch.
So there was a lot of things too, and then we can get off this topic, but there was a lot of things too where leading up to the election, all the left's dangerous rhetoric, the things they're saying not
Mm-hmm.
true. Tell me what is not turning out to be true thus far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's all, or at least a lot of it is turning out to be very correct. What was being said.
Yeah. Like we've been saying for a while, they're lying to your face. They're just straight up lying to you. And yeah,
And,
just
and
wake up.
y'all couldn't just figure it out like 2 weeks before you did.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Look up what tariffs are before you cast your vote and you realize that it's going to raise prices on everything you buy. Come on. Come on, man.
Yeah. Just interesting.
Yeah.
Real interesting.
Yeah. Anything else?
Um, no, I think that's probably good enough for now.
All right. Cool. Yeah, no, I'm good. I think we're at a good time, good spot here to call it good for the day and yeah, again, we're just trying a different format out here, seeing how it works. We'll figure out, how we're going to do going forward. Some weeks we'll probably have a more in-depth research point of view to share with y'all, and other times it's probably going to be a little more conversational. We do plan to do some more movie discussions like we did with the Scrooge and Christmas Vacation, which was a super fun episode where we had my buddy Brenton on with us, and we're going to have some more shows like that in the pipeline, and yeah, we'll just kind of keep going and see how it goes. So thank you for being with us on this journey so far, and appreciate everyone listening. And y'all have a great week, a great new year, and we'll see you soon.